Hello and welcome to this Andreas NLP video podcast. A tough clinical diagnosis isn't a life sentence, using core transformation in a mental health setting. And I'm Tamara Andreas, co-author of the book Core Transformation, also international trainer for core transformation, the wholeness work, and NLP. And I'm delighted to introduce Betsy Koos, who has over 45 years experience as a highly successful psychotherapist. So Betsy's worked with thousands of clients. And in fact, in working in a mental health setting, she was successful with clients who had already tried many other therapies to no avail. So she'll be sharing some of the keys to her success with us. So Betsy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Tamara. I'm so excited to be here and get to share my wonderful experience with this work with my clients. I'm so happy to get to share that with other therapists and other people. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And so we'll talk back and forth, and then at the end there will be a Q&A. And so people watching can just put their questions into chat at any time, and then we'll get to some questions later. Okay, so now Betsy, your journey to become a psychotherapist began at a university, I believe. So tell us a little bit about your experience of this.
Okay, well, I will say really from my childhood, for some reason, I knew I wanted to work with people. And when I got to the point of being ready for college, I decided I would get my bachelor's in psychology. And so a lot of the classes were about things of dysfunctional behaviors and abnormal psychology and studying what's wrong with people. And it always made me curious, why would we be looking at that kind of thing? And I thought, we were here to help people. Why are we looking at what's wrong with them? So I was inspired to continue to search and find out what was it that people were doing to help other people.
Yeah, so right from the very beginning, you had like a little bit of a different perspective on things than what we could call the mainstream or traditional kind of approach. So yeah, and so then you got your degree in psychology. And what is your title now?
Well, now I am an LCSW. I graduated from undergraduate school and decided to go out and work in the field for a while, for about 5 years, before I decided to go back for my master's. And it was really then that I feel like I got my greatest education. I worked with people who, my first job was as a caseworker, working with people who were being moved from having spent their lives in mental institutions back into the community. And a lot of it, of course, was driven by funding. And they wanted people to get out into the world. And so really, I met these people that I had been learning about in college who were labeled with like different psychoses and schizophrenia. And I just saw them as real people with amazing resilience to their situation that they'd been living in, and amazing adaptive responses to their circumstances. So I just always kept having a difficulty with, what is this diagnosing thing?
Yeah. So you have a little different idea about diagnosing people. You have a little different perspective on that than some people do who are in the field. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I guess for me, it's a matter of what is it that we need to do to actually help people. And really putting people, finding out information about what's going on and what's wrong with them and putting them into these labels is not really something that I have found to be that useful. I, as a solution-focused therapist, I want to be able to work with how to help people get where they want to be. And so spending time and putting them into these labels, I have to do a lot of work to find out what's really going on. That is what we can work with to help them.
Okay, so sounds like what you're finding is that the diagnosis doesn't really give you what you need in order to help the person.
Exactly. And I think the thing often is when I work with people who are labeled in these diagnoses, they begin to think, excuse me, that's who they are. And they define themselves by their label. And that makes it even more difficult, excuse me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Feel free at any time. Yeah. And I find this, of course, too. I work with clients as well, not as a therapist, but as a coach. And I also find that if somebody is labeling themselves, oh, I'm a loser, or I'm a, if they label themselves as being some kind of problem, then that can make it more difficult to change. And so you have when we're ready to change, then there's a different kind of approach that works better.
Exactly. And I think those people don't even know that they can change. That's really who they think they are. And it becomes much more of a hopeless situation that there's nothing to do. But try to spend time understanding where they came from.
Right.
And,
so you see a lot of people, it sounds like, who don't really even believe or think that they could change. And so, like, the best I can do is somehow learn to cope with these problems, as opposed to really being able to change them.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And now, along the way, as you've been kind of developing your approach, I'm sure you've learned a lot from a lot of different sources. What are some of the main areas of knowledge, or the main kinds of ideas that have been influential for you in creating your approach?
Okay, so in my really early 20s, when I was just beginning to become a therapist and learn to work with people, I came across a book called Uncommon Therapy by Jay Haley, which is written about a man named Dr. Milton Erickson, who was known to be the world's greatest hypnotherapist, really. And he was able to help people from around the world that would come to him that nobody else could help. And so I always wanted to learn, how did he do what he did? So that has been my driving force. And so I found that the NLP group was modeling his work. So I studied what they did. And then there's also groups called solution focused and brief strategic therapy and on different things. And of course, NLP that has led eventually the core transformation process that was created and aligning perceptual positions. So I've worked with studying many of these things to learn how to be able to do these interventions that, I feel like I know a little bit about how he did what he did, and I do my best to help people based on that, based on those skills and tools. So it's always about, for me, solution focused therapy and how to help people actually get results and not have to sit in therapy sessions for days and hours and months and years talking about problems.
Yeah. So when you're talking about solution focused therapy, then how is this different in the experience of it from what we might call traditional or mainstream therapy?
Okay. So it's very much as I always talk with new clients who call me to suggest that they think about what it is they want to get from their therapy, what they want to have be different and better in their life. And that's a very new question for most people. And they're usually quite prepared to come in and share what's been wrong and why they're the way they are. And again, as we said, not really having any belief that change is possible.
Yeah. So, and you were sharing with me that in traditional therapy, how would they spend the hour? Like, if they have an hour to do something, how would they spend this time typically? in your
Well, and in my experience at mental health centers, where I know people are trained to try to do what they can to help, but they
Mhm.
spend a lot of time to finding out where problems came from, what's been going on in our past that got us where we are. And I really find that a lot of people think and believe that if they knew why they are the way they are, that that would make a difference.
Mhm.
And in my experience, I have not found that. They might know where they came from, where their problems came from, but
Mhm.
nothing has really changed. So just
Yeah.
starting to open to the possibility of what could be different, helping people know that it's possible to look for results,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I guess as a therapist, as a professional, I feel like it's my job to help them be able
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah, and so you're saying that like with a more traditional approach, they really spend a lot of time rehashing the problems, rehashing the
Mhm,
past and how
mhm,
horrible things have been and things
mhm,
that kind of thing. And
mhm.
so I've got to think that that would be really stressful for for the therapist for one thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
I
Yes.
can't imagine somebody, listening to, horrible problems hour after hour or day after
I
day and
know.
not finally feeling kind of burnt out.
Exactly, Tamara. I feel like I never could have been a therapist as long as I have, working with as many people as I do, if I had to sit and listen to those stories. And again, I think clients believe that that's what's important to share, so they have
Oh,
to dredge
yeah.
it all back up and relive it. And I always say, you've lived it enough already. It's time to
Hmm.
now move forward into
Hmm.
where you want to get to.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Everybody is really making the best choices that they know to make, that they have available
Absolutely.
to them. And of course, this includes, therapists, in my experience, all the therapists that I have met have been
Mhm.
just incredibly wonderful people who
Mhm.
really want to help. They have a passion to help others, and
Mhm.
so they're just doing what they're taught to do. That
You're
that
absolutely
they
right.
believe will help. And so,
Mhm.
and in your experience, you found that focusing on what is wanted works better,
Right.
and it's also easier on you. You don't get burnt out with this
Oh,
approach.
no, no, I don't have to be drained by the stories. And I'll talk
Yeah.
about this more about when we work with core transformation, how it's such a wonderful experience for me because I get to be
Totally.
with my clients with going into wonderful states of being.
Oh,
So,
I know. For me, as a coach, using it in the coaching context, I
mhm,
have to say that at the end of the session, I usually feel better than I did at
yes.
the beginning. I feel like more calm and yet more energized. And yeah, so
Absolutely, absolutely. And I
sometimes I
always
almost
say,
feel like I should pay them.
I know, isn't that the truth? I know. We both benefit from it and we all benefit from it so much.
Oh, I
I
know.
always I always have said that it's my goal in my therapy with clients to help them feel better when they leave a session than they did when they came in.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think they do, and as you say, we do too. And that's just such a great thing for everybody
Totally.
to get to experience being in a better state of being and not just kind of trying to relive problems and think that that's going to make a difference.
So this allows us, if we're a professional guide of one kind or another, it
Mhm.
helps us then to help them better as well if we are in a more resourceful state. So
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
so
yes. We hear
that's
so much about burnout, and we don't have to burn out when we are in a good state, right?
yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to guess there may be some therapists who are watching this and thinking about some difficult clients that they've had or some kind of diagnostic categories that they have worked with that they found really difficult and
Mhm.
challenging. So, would you be willing to share some of your specific experiences with us?
I would love to. I'm going to start with when I first got into doing therapy at a mental health center, and I was asked to specialize in something. And with NLP, we don't necessarily need to specialize because it works well for most everything. So I kind of got selected to pick the people with eating disorders because in our community, there weren't really any people that knew about that and wanted to work with it much. And I'd been in Chicago and I'd learned a little bit about it from Salvador Minuchin, who had developed some processes for it. So I started working with people with those labels of eating disorders.
Okay. And would you share an example of a specific person that you've worked with that had some kind of difficulty in this area of eating?
Sure. I would say that a lot of the times when I see people with these problems, they've been searching for a lot of help in other places and ways and feel like things really haven't changed. And they've, a lot of people even have been in hospitalization or treatment programs. And so they come and be just feeling an internal struggle with wanting to do something different in their relationship with food, but really not having been able to do that successfully. So with that group, I work a lot with that kind of addiction and other addictions as well.
If I could just interject. So, like, for example, how is there somebody that comes to mind that you've worked with that has struggled with being overweight and maybe had already tried other things and then came to you, and then what happened?
Okay. So I think of a particular woman who had really been struggling with trying to lose weight and been on all kinds of programs and things and just couldn't and felt like she really kept gaining. And so I really, to me, it's an education at the beginning of my work with people to help them recognize that they've been trying to do what they've been doing in the best way they can. And yet it's really not been helping. And yet people tend to do more of the same of what's not working, hoping it will. So being able then to introduce that really their eating patterns have been there with a deeper purpose and underlying positive intention. They've been trying to help them based on when this pattern was learned.
Okay. So this woman that you came with, you helped her to discover that there was an underlying positive intention. And now when you say underlying, I'm going to just explain to people a little bit how we work with core. You're talking about doing core transformation, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm going to just let people know a little bit about how we work with core transformation to find these underlying things. So when somebody has something that they want to change, they've struggled with it, and yet they're not able to change it. Well, what that lets us know is that it's not really in their conscious control. They already know that this behavior is causing a problem, and yet it's not changing. If it was in their conscious control, they would have already changed it. So we know we need to work with the unconscious for it. And as we do this, and when this happens, it's like the behavior is happening on automatic pilot, and it's as if there's a part of us doing it, even though consciously we don't want it to happen. So, for example, let's say that if I find myself eating donuts, but I'd really like to eat something healthy instead, we could say there's a part of me that wants to eat the donuts, and there's also another part of me that wants to eat something healthy. And so we explore with these unconscious parts to find out what is wanted through eating the donuts or whatever the behavior is. We find out what's wanted that was driving the behavior.
Exactly. And I think being able to work at that level, people can identify that. I have found that most people are trying to get a sense of comfort from food.
Right.
And based on when it was learned, which is usually a pretty young age. And so they keep wanting to get that need met and get that sense of comfort. So I think the whole idea of a lot of other therapies, if I can come back to that do things to try to take that away, I think helps create that response of holding on tighter. And so people get stuck in what we call resistance, but it's their trying to meet their deeper inner needs in the best
Right.
way they can. So,
Right.
So when I was able to work with this woman to help her feel that and take within that sense of comfort and all the things that that brought to her eventually, then she had what she needed within, and it became much easier to release that old pattern without effort.
Exactly. Yeah. So with core transformation, we get to satisfy the deepest inner desire or yearning of this inner part, the inner part that had been getting us to do, like in this case, to overeat or to eat the wrong foods. So awesome. Okay. So
Yes.
now another area that commonly comes up, I think, is anxiety. So, is there an example you can share of somebody that you worked with to help them change this experience that they might call anxiety?
Yes. I have a man I've been working with for a little bit here that about 68 years old and been in the mental health system for at least 10 years. He's on about 5 psychotropic drugs, which he's having lots of side effects to and really wants to get off them. But he described having panic attacks. And then he got to the point of having fear of having a panic attack, which created even more panic. And so I worked with him to help him understand that, of course, what he was trying to do was, trying to help himself and to help him recognize that with all of his efforts, nothing was changing. So we were able to work on that fear response and get him to recognize that it was part that was there trying to serve a purpose and meet a need, and help him go within and get what that part was there trying to do for him.
So you helped him communicate with that inner part that had been generating the anxiety, and it was trying to do something positive for him.
Yeah.
And as a result of working with this person using core transformation, then what happened as a result?
He had been having panic attacks daily, at least, and lasting for a long time. He came back after we worked on that process a week later, and he said he didn't have a panic attack all week. And he did have something that had come up the night before when we met. And so I asked what was going on in his thoughts and experiences that contributed to that. And he talked about worry about his health and his wife's health. So we worked with that again with core transformation. And he got this deep sense of peace, really. And was able to release that.
Yeah, and I'd like to just comment here when you say he got this deep sense of peace. So some people watching might think, well, that is kind of strange because you were working on anxiety. How did you end up with peace? And so I want to just let everybody know that as we're doing core transformation, what we discover is that through this guided process, this precise way of questioning and process that we do, every part we work with ends up with something that we call a core state. And it's something that is really it's experienced. Some people experience it as kind of subtle. Many people experience it as being really profound. People use words like peace, joy, oneness, sometimes just a really deep sense of love or presence. So there are various words that might be used, for it. And it's always, though, at a beingness level. So it's beyond having anything or trying to get anything, interacting with others. It's a state that just is. And many people are actually surprised that they even have this capacity to experience this. And even when we start with a part that was generating anxiety, or worry, in this case, worry, it still ends up at a core state. It ends up at a wonderful state that's at a beingness level. And then this becomes the resource that transforms the whole experience of whatever they were working with. So thank you, Betsy, for letting me step in there for a moment.
Oh, please. Thank you. I'm so glad to have you explain that so well. And I appreciate that, because I always have to try to explain it to people. That was beautiful. Thank you. So really, I just want to say that it really speaks, I think, at a cellular level to the unconscious when we have those states of being, and people do just transform. And it's just such a beautiful, wonderful thing for me to work with and help people with. And I just want to say, with this particular gentleman, he was involved in medical treatments that they thought would take 3 to 6 months. And after a couple of weeks after we did this work, he went back in and they said, "You're healing so quickly. We're not going to have to go much longer at all." And so I just think, I mean, for me, I believe very much in the mind and body interaction, and we get the mind settled and the body functions so much better. So I think that all contributes.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this. And as just a little bit of an aside, even though this isn't our main topic for today, but I just want to, bounce off that a little bit. And I'll mention that there's actually very mainstream research that shows that there's a connection between stress and various kinds of symptoms. And there's even a study that showed that wounds heal more quickly when a person is not under a lot of stress. And so it really does stand to reason that the work that you did with him could very well have made a difference, had been a factor in his unexpectedly good healing or rapid healing that he was experiencing.
Yes. And it's so good to see, I think, of things in the upward spiral instead of the downward spiral. And he really felt so much better that he was doing better. And he just did release the fear of having panic attacks, because he knew he had ways of dealing with them if they came up. So
awesome. Yeah.
Wonderful healing.
Awesome. All right. And now, can you share an example of somebody who was given a diagnosis of depression and you were able to help them?
Sure. Yeah. So a gentleman about 50 years old came in, and I do see a lot of people who've been in other kind of treatments and feeling kind of hopeless because nothing's worked. And he had been in many other therapies and workshops and really pursuing. So first, I really do a lot to find out what's going on that's depressing him. As Richard Bandler, our NLP person who developed that, said, "How are you depressing yourself?" So I always think of that and wonder. So he basically was focusing on the worst possible possibility in life, and felt like nothing he could do was right. And he started getting so he couldn't go anywhere because he felt like he would make mistakes. So he was isolated and just feeling alone.
And it makes sense, doesn't it, as well, that if we're thinking about the very worst possible possibility, that this would result in feeling depressed or being depressed. So it makes sense.
Exactly. And so many things are trying to take those parts and patterns away. And so when I could help him recognize it was there to serve a purpose and meet a need, that part needed to be alert, but we go within, and I guided him within to find his inner answers. And he was able to really feel deeper inner sense of well-being and feeling good about who he was, and taking that through, and not needing to be so focused on the worst possible possibility. And so, change happens. He could start going out more and, feeling comfortable with himself and with other people. And so not only just resolving the problem, but really getting some changes that, make his life so much more and more fulfilling. So
Awesome. Yeah. And you worked with him over a number of sessions, is that right? It sounds
Yes,
like you
yes,
worked on a bunch of components of his
yeah,
experience.
exactly, exactly. And it's always this balance of kind of helping people recognize that they don't have to keep going back into their past,
Mm-hmm.
and to help them recognize that they have answers within. And the more they experience that, the more they're open to that. So I
Yeah.
find that it gets at the beginning, it's kind of just minimal, and as we go, it gets to be deeper and more rich for people, and really communicates within that we have what we want. We don't have to keep trying to do these things and be these ways that don't work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's so wonderful to see that change. I just
Awesome.
you
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
to
So
see that.
now, yeah, yeah. Now we get asked sometimes, what about
Mhm.
bipolar disorder? Does core transformation work with that? And so now I know
Mhm.
that you don't pay a lot of attention to the diagnoses when you work with people.
Mhm.
However, what experience have you had with people who have been given this diagnosis?
Yeah, and again at the mental health center, that everybody had a diagnosis, and there were a number of people that I worked with that one that I again would not have called that, but that's what it was called. So
Mhm.
um, and in general, I have tended to find that there's some kind of form of PTSD, or you know some
Mhm.
reactive response, that if that's going on, I love another NLP process, which is the trauma phobia process, to help release the automatic fight flight response. And
Right.
that sometimes I feel like that needs to happen before then they can benefit from core
Okay. Yeah.
transformation.
And we also recommend in our teaching that for some people, it can be important to do that process
Mhm.
early on, and then it makes it easier then to do core transformation.
Exactly. Mhm.
So
Then
is
he
there
was receptive to it. Mhm.
Okay, so you're thinking of a particular person and that you worked with, it sounds like, with
Mhm.
bipolar disorder
Mhm.
diagnosis, and you did the
Mhm.
phobia trauma process with him,
Yeah.
and then you did core transformation. Is that right?
Mhm.
Or
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
and what
absolutely.
happened with that?
Well, and again, then we define what is the specific thought or behavior feeling that's going on.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of fear was underlying, and that would send him into places. So I think clearing in his mind and experience, and he could be very happy, and he tried to deny the fear, but it would
Hmm.
always come back, and then it would bring him down. And I think that's what people define as bipolar, with those different states. I mean, there's a lot of other things that go into it.
Hmm.
So what I found was the automatic fight flight response was resolved, and then he was able to work with the fear part. It was
Hmm.
there to try to protect him, to feel safe and okay, and a sense
Hmm.
of his own strength, and
Yeah.
and he really stabilized quite a bit from that.
Okay. And as a result, what did he experience in his life? What did he notice that was different?
He was feeling more stable. He was able to function better in his day-to-day
Mhm.
life, not so distracted by mood swing kind of things, and
Mhm.
really it's hard to describe what self-acceptance, how that shows up, but it's people have that sense more of self-acceptance when they really learn to work with their parts and not feel like they're trying to get rid of them, and in that inner struggle with that. So kind of getting
Yeah.
the core states, getting that sense of self-acceptance, he just functioned so much better. And again, this was a while ago, and I don't have my notes, so I didn't remember specifically more than that, but that's in general. I think he got to that place of more
Right. And
self-acceptance.
approximately how many sessions, and I know you don't have your notes anymore because it was back at a mental health center,
Mhm.
probably, right?
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
Approximately how many sessions would you say that you worked with him to get this wonderful shift? Sounds like of being more stable, more comfortable, more accepting himself.
Um, I'm going to say that it takes probably a number of sessions first to get people who have been trained in their therapy to think there's no possibility for change. So I always want to build good rapport. So I would say that's usually 2, 3, 4 sessions that it would take. And then when people start to get open to wanting to work with these parts and recognizing it doesn't help to try to get rid of them, I think he experienced change after the first session and that we worked, and then he was really open to doing more, and things just continued to progress. And in my private therapy sessions, I will kind of say, I don't think we need to meet anymore, but when people come to the mental health center, that they're required to see a therapist in order to get their medication. So they will continue to be in therapy. So I will continue to work with him, and we continue to enjoy working together and improving his life.
Okay, awesome. All right, so now I'm going to ask you about something that that probably is generally considered or has a reputation for being one of the major difficult ones, and that is psychosis. So would you give us an example of somebody that you worked with had some kind of a label along those lines?
Sure. So this woman that I worked with had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. She had been a very effective nurse all her life and got to the point where she had this nervous breakdown, they call it, and basically a lot of the symptoms of that are hearing voices. And so she was not functioning. Again, she had more medications and inpatient treatments than anybody had ever known, and really stuck in, trying to get rid of the voices and couldn't, and it just kept getting worse. So when I met with her, and again, took quite a while to get rapport, and for somebody who's being told to don't listen to your voices, to ask somebody to go within and listen, it took a little bit to be able to get there.
Right.
But when we did, I started to work with communicating with the voices. And she ended up finding out they wanted wonderful things for her, and she could have that more in her experience, so that the voices weren't so interfering, and if they were there, she could feel like they were her allies and work with them. And she started functioning so much better that even her psychiatrist noticed and came to talk to me about how impressed he was with how much more present she was and available to communicate, and just really doing better functioning in life in general.
So it sounds like you worked with her over a period of time. Like, about approximately how long would you say you worked with her?
And she would be one that I would say it was at least a year. And again, I think as long as I was there and she was there, I would be working with her. So it was kind of nice, because again, if I do very short-term therapy, which is why I say thousands of people, because I don't see them for very long. But being able to work with somebody who'd had been through so much and get through so many, keep working on different layers and levels, and just seeing things in her life, and she was able to do well functioning in her day-to-day life without assistance, which she hadn't been able to do. And
so she became more functional, and you worked with her for continual improvement purposes for it ended up being like about a year, which that might to some people sound like a long time. However, so Betsy, if you were to do a little thought experiment here and just imagine if this same person had spent that year doing traditional therapy or mainstream therapy and had gone in to talk about her problems and why she had these problems, etc. If she had done that for a year, instead of working with you, what would be the expected result of that?
Well, and I think how I can answer that, Tamara, is I think that's really what she'd been doing for the 30 years before I saw her. And so it was like, that was the downward spiral. And really it was getting worse and worse. And
Mm.
again, as I said, if there's a part that they're trying to be a survival mechanism and we do something to try to take it away, I just see people in this inner conflict of, part wants to hold on, certainly part wants to let go, but we don't have control of that. Like you were saying before, it's not a
Right,
consciously
right.
generated response. So
And doesn't that make a lot of sense, what you're saying here? So if there's an inner part that's producing a certain behavior, whether that's, anxiety or hearing voices or whatever it is, and this inner part does it because it believes it has to do it to survive. This is a survival mechanism for this inner
exactly.
part. Then if all we do is try to fight with this part and make it stop and push it away and stop listening to it, and that kind of thing, doesn't it kind of make sense that approach, you know, likely isn't going to lead to change, and it might even make it worse, might even
Exactly.
contribute
And
to.
exactly sitting and talking about it and it just keeps bringing it back up. And
Yeah.
people have to keep reliving it. So to be able to transform it with this
Hmm.
wonderful process and release it and move on is
Okay.
a beautiful thing. So
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, one thing I want to say is, for any therapist out there that for whom, if there's anybody listening for whom this is like really a totally radically new idea, then I just would suggest to explore it gently. You don't need to believe something just because we say it.
mm,
But it's something that you might want to explore and check out a little at a time in your own experience, and reach your own conclusion about these kinds of things.
yeah.
Um,
So
okay.
there's the one other case that I don't know if you have time for about the
Mm.
addiction. Are we gonna have
Yeah,
time
go
to talk
ahead. We
about
have a,
that?
we have a, let's take a little bit extra time.
Okay. I just think,
Just
yeah,
briefly. Yeah.
briefly. So, so I'll just say this is a young woman about 40 who came in for other things, and really we realized that she was using drugs and alcohol for trying to deal with her symptoms. So,
Mhm.
in the first session, I believe she was open to us working with that part, find out what it
Mhm.
was they were trying to do for her, help her to have that within. And
Mhm.
I've known her now for several years since then, and she has been drug and alcohol free after that one session. And she'd been in inpatient treatment facilities. It's quite amazing when people can work with those parts and not feel like somebody's trying to take them away. It's like
Mhm. Mhm.
just a very quick and deep change that helped her in all areas. And then we kept, of course, working with more transformation with other parts. But
Yeah.
it's hard for people to let go of addictions if it's trying to meet a need. So we want
Mhm.
to help
Mhm.
people have that more within, so they have that choice. So
Yeah, wonderful. That's wonderful. And also I want people though to also be aware that um, not everyone who has an addiction will experience a shift from one session. So if you're using core transformation, it just kind of depends on how many pieces there are to it. And so sometimes there's, one or two major pieces and like, oh, that's it. It shifts very quickly. Other times it might be more complex experience with more pieces to it. And so, I don't want people to go into expecting it should be one session, and then if it isn't, then it
good point.
you know what I'm saying, to not set
Absolutely.
themselves up for feeling like they failed, or that
Yes,
kind of thing, but
yes. This
just
was a very good one, but yeah, it isn't
yeah.
always quite so quick and easy. You're right. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah. So
important.
it's what I usually, you could tell me what you say to clients maybe. What I tend to say is that what's helpful is whatever it is that you want to change, to be open to the possibility that change can happen. Maybe it will happen quickly. That's a possibility.
Mhm.
And at the same time, being open and willing to go the distance with it, to have persistence if there's more pieces involved that need to be addressed, need to be transformed.
Absolutely. Because when we work with one, oftentimes it's like other parts come up and say, oh, so you're going to work with me and not try to get rid of me. So, and I
Yeah.
think every time we do that, we get to get the deeper underlying gift and treasure those parts have.
Yes, for sure.
So, yeah.
Okay, so now I want to go to resources. How can somebody learn more? And so if you want to learn more about core transformation, the first thing is to, I suggest checking out our free video introduction, 80 minutes to core transformation, and it includes a demonstration. It includes, oops, I see I made a mistake on my slide here. It includes a group guided experience. It does not include aligning perceptual positions. Sorry, that belongs with the next point. The next step after the free introduction is going to a core transformation foundation course. And this is live online. Well, there's two ways to do it. One way is live online, and the other way is there's a streaming video course. And this does include aligning perceptual positions. And I know because we're short on time, I'm going to just mention Betsy shared with me that she's also really excited about the aligning perceptual positions process and wanted to talk about that, but we're just really running out of time. We might have to have you back sometime. So now with the foundation course, if you do the live online version, then you get to do exercises with each other. So you're guiding and being guided through the core transformation process. You get to experience the benefits of core transformation for yourself. And that's really the important aspect of it. And now, there's one coming up soon that's live online, and it'd be good if you want to do it to register soon because two reasons. There's a timely discount of $100 if you're watching this live. If you're watching a recording, then who knows? But if you're watching this live, there's a timely discount of $100 if you sign up soon. And in addition, it has happened before that a class has filled, so we have limited numbers of spots in it. I don't know if it will fill this time or not, but we do have limited spots. And now, if for some reason this doesn't work for you, maybe the schedule doesn't work out, there's also a streaming video course that you can then take where you can do it on your own schedule. And then you might be wondering, well, how do I do the exercises? We also offer a practice group, and this is run by Mark Andreas, my co-trainer for the advanced CT trainings. And with the practice group, then you get to meet once a week, and then you take turns guiding and being guided. So you get to experience the exercises that way. We also offer advanced and coach certification. When I say coach certification, yes, it's for coaches. It's also for therapists. It's for pastoral counselors. It's for anyone who wants to develop guiding skills at a professional level. And it's, if you are thinking that you might consider, once you have a little bit more experience with it, you might consider doing the advanced training and the coach certification as well. I just want to let you know then that time is of the essence. We only do this cycle once a year of the advanced trainings. And so if you think you might want to do it and you'd like to do it now rather than waiting a whole year for it, or year and a half, almost 2 years really for it, then it would be good to start with the foundation course now. Take the next one in March, or if you do the streaming video course, then do that now to start the practice group in March, so that you'll be ready to join the advanced training cycle that starts, late spring of this year. Okay, now, Betsy Koos, if you'd like to learn more about her thoughts of things, get to know her ideas a little bit more, betsykoos.com. That's a wonderful website, easy to remember. Betsy Koos, KOOS.com. And so, yeah, and all of the links and details are also in the description below the video on YouTube. Okay, So now it's time for some question and answer, and we don't have very much time for this, I'm sorry to say, but that's because there were so many gems that we've already gotten. And so we have just a little time now for Q&A. And so Erica is here with us. And Erica, would you let us know a little bit about, well, actually, let's go straight to a question. Is there a question that's come up in chat that you'd like to share?
Hi, everyone. Yes, I think we have a person that's asking, what are the reasons solution-focused therapy hasn't been accepted more in the last 30 years? Is it evidence-based?
Okay, yeah. So did you hear that, Betsy? I'm not sure.
I did. And
Okay,
I don't know. I don't know. And I cannot imagine. I worked hard in my mental health center to try to get people to look at things differently. And I think, I don't know, I think usually things are driven by funding and the fact that it's so much more short term. I think that is helping it get more popular, in my understanding.
Okay. So you're saying that solution-focused therapy is becoming more popular. And is that right?
Right, because it's, well, and maybe get to be more mainstream because then insurance companies pay less for fewer sessions. That's what I think drives change.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So by insurance companies getting the idea that they can pay for fewer sessions. So yeah, so they actually have a financial incentive in things working better, which is the same thing that the client will want, is for things to work better and faster. So,
exactly.
Okay. Yeah. And so Erica, is there another question you'd like to bring to us?
We have a couple of questions, great questions. They're bringing forward conditions that they're curious about, how the process might work for them, such as Asperger's and girls that cut themselves. How would you approach a client like that? Or if you work with people with OCD or compulsion,
Okay, so yeah, let's take these one at a time. So
results have you achieved? Yeah.
So what's the first one, cutting?
Asperger's.
Asperger's. Girls that cut themselves. What's the first question?
Oh, girls that cut themselves.
I have worked with many, and I help them to recognize that part is they're trying to serve a deeper purpose and positive intention again. I mean, and working with it and helping people have what that part has wanted for them within has been amazing. And usually it's anger or rage or, trying to act out and and it's, these parts always have wanted something wonderful. And if we don't help people get that within, then they don't have any other choice.
Yeah. So
they do.
Yeah, in your experience with these girls that are cutting themselves, do you typically find that core transformation does help them by working with these parts that are involved, that it does help them to change this behavior?
I do. I do. And I will say that as a family therapist also, I always have to do other interventions in other parts of the family system, of course, because if they're in the same system, things don't change, so changing that and helping them, I think then they can be receptive and very significant changes and helping people again, learning to accept these parts as opposed to feel like they're a bad part and trying to get rid of them.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. And OCD is another one that was mentioned.
Okay. And that's, I think it's the very same, that's a part. I think really having done this with so many people and with myself so many times, I just know that these parts always want something wonderful. And I work with them, and it's like, and the idea of interrupting the attempted solution of trying to take it away, through medication or whatever other practices people do to say, quit doing that thing that makes them hold on tighter. And this is such a wonderful, better choice to heal within very deeply so that people can have choices.
Yeah. So, a shorter question for you, Betsy, might be, it sounds like since you've worked with thousands of clients, you've pretty much covered the basis in terms of all the major diagnostic categories anyway.
Absolutely.
I know there's so many subcategories, but you've at least covered all the major categories that people are
so.
familiar with and think of. Is there any diagnostic category that you have worked with using core transformation where you have found core transformation was not helpful?
I would say the only time it isn't, in my experience, is if a person, well, I can say a person isn't motivated to change.
Mm-hmm.
But for me as a therapist, it's my job to help them find a way to be motivated. So usually I can help people get to the place where they are.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's if there's somebody that's holding on because that's a part of them they want to hang on to and they don't want to do anything different, I can't make them. I think that would be the only category I can think of.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for your perspective on that. And, of course, I've also found that as well true in a coaching context that if somebody, for whatever reason, they're seeking out help and yet they're not really motivated to change, then as long as that is true, change is unlikely to happen. And it can change. Like you say, it's possible sometimes to help somebody discover a reason to change, a motivation for change, in which case then it becomes possible. So it's not as if that's a person that could never possibly have change.
Right.
But as long as they have no motivation to change, well, it's probably not going to happen because, well, fortunately, all of us human beings have free will, right?
Fortunately, yeah.
So, yeah, fortunately. So it's probably a good thing that we can't just make people change if they don't want to, right?
No.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, because we all can make our own choices. Okay, well, our time is now coming to a close then. And so I just want to thank you all for joining us. And thank you, Betsy, of course, for being here and sharing your experience and your wisdom and expertise, all of your learnings with us.
Thank you.
It's just been really special.
Thank you, Tamara. Can I just say, I am always so grateful to you and Connie Ray for this process. I have seen it change myself and so many people in such positive ways, and I'm so grateful. So I'm so happy to be able to share this. Thank you.
Yeah, you mentioned Connie Ray. So Connie Ray is the developer of Core Transformation, and I am one of the primary trainers now. And also Mark and I together, and with input from Connie Ray, continually now develop additional materials for Core Transformation to help people be even more successful, learning some nuances that can help them be even more successful with it. And so, yeah, and also I'm going to just thank briefly that there's a whole podcast team here. There's Erica, Zach is with us, other people who aren't even present with us here in the background that contribute to making this happen. And I just want to acknowledge that it's not something that I did by myself or Betsy and I did by ourselves. We have a lot of people supporting us. And so thank you all for joining us. And once again, this is Tamara Andreas, trainer with Andreas NLP. I've had the pleasure of interviewing Betsy Koos about her success as a psychotherapist using core transformation with clients. If you'd like to find out more about what we offer at Andreas NLP, you can just go to andreasnlp.com. Right now, you can get the free introduction to core transformation I've been talking about at andreasnlp.com/free, Free. And then you'll see all of our free stuff. If you get on our email list, you'll be sure to get notice of more podcasts like this one, plus other offerings. Join us again in 2 weeks. I'll have a chance to interview Stephen Josephs, joining us again, only this time on a very different topic. Last time we talked about executive coaching, and this time we'll be discussing how can core transformation be an incredible gift for people with a background in IFS, internal family systems. And so I hope to see you then.